Do you ever play a game so good that you just sit there thinking, why the hell is no one talking about this? This is why I have mentioned a list of underrated games that I wish more people would have played. Max Payne 3. One of the most underrated third-person shooters out there. This game is straight up stylish and has some of the most intense gunplay I've ever experienced. Rockstar really took the Max Payne formula and modernized it while keeping that signature slow-motion, bullet-dodging badassery intact. Max is older and drowning in booze and painkillers, just trying to escape his past. Instead of the snowy streets of New York, he's in the crime-infested chaos and working as a bodyguard for some rich family. But of course, things go sideways fast, and Max is thrown into a whirlwind of violence. It's basically a non-stop downward spiral, and you feel every bit of his exhaustion and frustration. But let's be real, the gameplay is where this thing shines. The gunplay is chef's kiss, where every shot feels weighty and the way bodies react to bullets is just so satisfying. The way Rockstar handled the cinematic transitions with those drugged out effects and seamless cutscenes really keeps the game flowing like a movie. Honestly, you could simply think of this game as the modernized version of OG Max Payne. There are so many things that are still the same as the original, but the best thing is that these features are highly tweaked. All in all, if you have played the OG Max Payne in your teenage years and somehow skipped out on the sequels, then this is your chance to get back and relive your memories.
You should have killed me in the office when you had the chance.
There's still time, meu camarada.
Watch Dogs. So, Watch Dogs is basically Grand Theft Auto if you threw in a hacking system and made it all about surveillance, control, and digital warfare. The story is a typical revenge-filled narrative. The main character has lost his niece because of a job gone wrong, so now he's out for revenge. As a player, the game lets you hack traffic lights, cameras, bank accounts, and even mess with people's phones, making them panic, distract them, or straight up steal their cash. And you're walking around, hacking everything with a tap, causing chaos without even pulling out a gun. That said, Watch Dogs shines in the open world chaos you can cause. If you want to black out an entire block and disappear into the shadows, then by all means go ahead. Want to turn a random guy's phone into a bait distraction? It's also possible. The side content is hit or miss. Some mini-games like digital trips are fun, but a lot of the filler activities feel like they exist just to pad the runtime. Overall, it's a good game, it's got a killer concept, but the execution feels like it could have been pushed further. If you love open-world games with a different kind of gameplay twist, it's worth a shot, but don't expect it to hit the same level as GTA or Sleeping Dogs. Bright Memory Infinite. This game is straight up visual insanity. It's like a love child of Doom, Devil May Cry, and Call of Duty all packed into a lightning-fast first-person action shooter. The moment you start, you're thrown into this futuristic world where you play as an absolute badass armed with a sword, guns, and telekinetic abilities. You're slicing enemies midair, juggling them with gunfire, and pulling off insane combos that make you feel like a one-person army. And just when you think you've seen it all, the game hits you with a storm, ancient warriors, and even a massive freaking dragon. It's a really short game, but every second is pure awesome. Infinite is a wild ride worth taking. Just don't expect a deep story, it's more about cool moments than anything else. It's literally a must-play game because not a lot of people know about it, as it is extremely underrated. In fact, even though the developers aren't a big studio or anything, the game has been created with an extremely low budget. This alone speaks to the effort that has been put into the game. Imagine what the developers could do with a big budget. I am super excited to see what they come up with next if they get a bigger budget.
Begin your investigation as soon as you receive your assigned location.
Okay, what's the current situation?
Phoenix Ace Attorney. This game sneaks up on you. At first glance, it looks like just another visual novel, but once you dive in, you realize it's something special. You're playing as a rookie defense attorney, and your job is to prove your client's innocent in court. It does sound simple, but trust me, it's definitely not easy at all. Each case starts out looking pretty straightforward, but the more you dig, the crazier things get. Witnesses lie through their teeth, prosecutors are always one step ahead, but that's what makes it so satisfying. When you finally present that one piece of evidence that turns the whole case around, it's chef's kiss perfection. The real hook of the game is how it makes you feel like a genius. One moment you're finding clues, connecting the dots, and the next thing you know, you're shouting, "I object!" in the courtroom. Low-key, the game is surprisingly hilarious, and the main character is a mess half the time, but his sarcastic internal monologues are golden. If you want to feel smarter than you actually are, Phoenix Attorney is the game you're looking for. Ghostwire Tokyo. If you're into a mix of creepy vibes and a city with an almost tangible sense of isolation, this game's got you covered. Tokyo has been hit by some strange supernatural event that wipes out the entire population, leaving only spirits and the occasional ghostly figure. You're a guy possessed by a spirit and you're left to uncover what happened while trying to survive in this haunting city. You'll use hand gestures to cast elemental powers, wind, fire, and water. It's like a weird mix of martial arts and magic, and the way you string together attacks just feels right. The more you get into it, the better it gets. At first, it might feel like you're just throwing punches, but once you start mastering your abilities, you'll feel like you're in total control of the chaos. Exploring Tokyo is easily one of the game's highlights. The open world aspect gives you a ton of freedom to roam. The sounds of whispers, and the sudden feeling that something's watching you, it keeps you on edge the whole time. And while the story can be a little slow at first, the more you dive in, the more you'll get hooked. Akito's journey gets deeper, and the emotional beats hit harder the more you uncover. Ghostwire Tokyo is definitely one of those games that takes its time to pull you in, but once you're in, you won't want to leave, especially if you're into supernatural horror with a side of action. West of Loathing. This is one of those rare games that takes a simple idea, stick figure cowboys in a slapstick RPG, and turns it into an absolute masterpiece. It's basically a Wild West adventure where you roam around solving problems, fighting demonic cows, and getting into the most ridiculous situations imaginable. It's packed with absurd quests and dialogue that had me laughing out loud more times than I can count. The writing is where the game truly shines. There's something funny or clever hidden in almost every interaction. It also does that thing where it respects your intelligence as a player. There are puzzles, choices that actually matter, and a surprising amount of depth under all the jokes. West of Loathing will be a great choice if you're in the mood for some lighthearted, hilarious RPG fun. Peaks of Yore. In short, this is a physics-based first-person climbing game. You're climbing various places, and the game definitely makes your journey harder, but still shows you those beautiful, serene views. Each peak presents its own set of challenges, requiring you to master different climbing techniques and utilize various gear. The physics-based mechanics make every ascent feel realistic, and the sense of accomplishment upon reaching a summit is truly rewarding. There are also two more awesome features. The first one is your fellow mountaineers. Interacting with them along the way provides insights and adds depth to the experience, and the second best thing is your base camp. The cabin serves as your base where you can rest, plan your next climb, and display trinkets collected during your journeys. Honestly, Peak of Yore is a pretty great game, especially if you mix in intense climbing with historical places.
A fella they call Porter sent me to deliver it. Said it was in honor of conquering your basic peaks.
Hifi Rush. Hifi Rush is an absolute ride from start to finish. You're thrown into a rebellion after getting turned into a cyborg, and the entire game moves to the beat. It's not just the soundtrack that synced up, everything from combat to movement flows with the rhythm, making each action feel more alive. Speaking of combat, it's ridiculously fun. You time your attacks to the music, and when everything clicks, it feels incredibly satisfying. You feel the variety of enemies keeps the action fresh, and you're never alone. Your crew's always by your side, helping you take down the chaos with their own unique abilities. That reminds me, the whole world is bursting with energy, which makes each fight feel like part of a living rock and roll show. If we talk about the story, then it's lighthearted, but it still makes you care about the characters and their journey, with plenty of laughs along the way. You'll also find yourself rooting for the team, especially as they come together. If you're after a game that's all about high energy and a killer soundtrack, then you're in the right place, because Hifi Rush has you covered. Also, it's quite underrated, but it will live up to your expectations if you are in the mood for some Diet Coke, some snacks, and just want to play a banger game.
Let's rock, big.
Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. This game is just straight up insane in the best way possible. If you've played it, you already know. It's got some of the most over-the-top action, ridiculous boss fights, and one of the most hype soundtracks in gaming history. You actually play as a badass cyber ninja with a high-frequency sword that can cut through literally anything. The gameplay is all about fast-paced, stylish combat with a parry system that feels incredibly satisfying once you get the hang of it. Instead of sneaking around like in traditional Metal Gear games, you're dashing into fights at full speed, slicing enemies into tiny pieces, and pulling off insane finishers that make you feel like a god. And let's talk about the bosses. Each one is its own spectacle, from the meme-fueled fight against Senator Armstrong to the chaotic battle with Jetstream Sam. Every boss fight has a dynamic track that kicks in at just the right moment, making you feel like you're starring in the most intense anime battle of all time. It's not the longest game, but it doesn't need to be. It's purely awesome from start to finish. If you haven't played it yet, just know that the first time you slice a Metal Gear Ray into pieces with your bare hands, you'll understand exactly why this game is legendary. Scarlet Nexus. It's one of those games that kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, but if you're into stylish action combat with a bit of a psychic anime twist, it's a hidden gem. You're not just swinging swords or guns, you're out here yeeting cars, poles, and entire chunks of the environment at enemies with your mind. The whole psychokinesis mechanic makes fights feel incredibly different, and when you start chaining telekinetic throws with melee attacks, it's just chef's kiss. It's fast, flashy, and smooth as hell. You actually play as two different protagonists with interwoven storylines, and it's got that anime sci-fi conspiracy vibe going on. Governments hiding shady stuff, secret experiments, and even some time travel stuff. The game's structure leans into a mix of action and character bonding. You spend time with your squad giving off that Persona Light social link energy, which actually pays off in combat since your party members grant you different powers like invisibility, duplication, and even slowing down time. The more you bond, the stronger those abilities get, which makes those character moments feel more meaningful. If I had to nitpick, I'd say the environments can get a little repetitive and the pacing in the second half slows down a bit, but if you love stylish action combat and some of the best anime aesthetic visuals in a game, Scarlet Nexus is absolutely worth the ride. Road 96. Okay, let's talk about Road 96. This game is a bit of a gem, a hidden gem if you will. It's one of those games that you might not have heard about, but it's definitely worth checking out. It's a road trip adventure game, but it's not just about driving from point A to point B. It's about the journey, the people you meet along the way, and the choices you make. You play as a teenager trying to escape an authoritarian regime in the fictional country of Petria. You'll hitchhike, meet interesting characters, make important decisions, and face all sorts of challenges along the way. The game is procedurally generated, so each playthrough is unique. You'll never have the same experience twice. What I love about Road 96 is the story. It's really well written and it's full of interesting characters. You really care about these people and their stories will stay with you long after you finish the game. The game also has a great soundtrack with a lot of catchy 90s tunes. If you're looking for a game that's fun, challenging, and thought-provoking, then I highly recommend Road 96. It's a hidden gem that deserves to be played by more people.
Truth is, I'm never going back home again. A lot of times, actually. It's scary there.
Plague Tale series. Plague Tale is an absolute must-play. The brief storyline is that the Black Plague is running wild and swarms of flesh-eating rats are basically an unstoppable force of nature. At its core, it's a survival adventure game that blends stealth and emotional storytelling. The two main characters are also an important part of the game. Amisha's and her brother Hugo's relationship is the essence. Throughout the story, we get to see so many emotional moments and truth reveals about Hugo's power, which is really super. Their relationship is the heart of the story. Amicia is fiercely protective, while Hugo is a scared, yet strangely gifted child. And by gifted, I mean he has a terrifying supernatural connection to the rats, which plays a huge role in both the gameplay and the plot. The gameplay itself is mostly about sneaking around heavily armored soldiers, avoiding swarms of rats, and using light and alchemical tricks to survive. You don't go in guns blazing, but you do get a slingshot that can take down enemies if you're clever about it. The sequel, Requiem, steps things up with more tools and a bigger world to explore, making it feel even more immersive. But honestly, what makes A Plague Tale so damn good isn't just the gameplay, it's the atmosphere and the storytelling. The voice acting sells every moment of desperation, hope, and heartbreak. The emotional punches in Requiem hit even harder, and without spoiling anything, let's just say it's a masterpiece to experience. If you're into games like The Last of Us, Hellblade, or Dishonored, you'll probably love A Plague Tale.
Looking for a doctor. Laurentius.
A doctor? Perhaps. A man did come and help at the hospice early on.
Asuras Wrath. This game is actually an anime on steroids. It's like if Dragon Ball Z, God of War, and a Buddhist fever dream had a wild over-the-top baby. You play as an exiled demigod who's beyond pissed off. The game kicks off with betrayal, his wife gets killed, and he gets sent to literal hell, but Asura doesn't stay down. My guy comes back angrier than ever, punching his way through gods and planetary-sized enemies like it's nothing. It's got that mix of brawler action and quick-time events that some people love and others side-eye. But here's the thing, Asuras Wrath isn't just about button mashing, it's a full-blown cinematic experience where your rage fuels the gameplay. One moment you're throwing hands with a god the size of a mountain, the next you're catching a sword that's literally stabbing through the earth. The real charm is in the storytelling. It's episodic, complete with anime-style to-be-continued cutaways and eye-soothing visuals. Every chapter is pure spectacle, pushing Ashura beyond his limits many times, but he just keeps getting back up. Honestly, if you love the idea of becoming an ultra-powerful god killer whose only purpose is to show the players some god-punching action, then by all means get your hands on Asuras Wrath. You're surely gonna love it.
Mithra's power. What did you do? Tell me what you've done with her!
Just Cause 2. This game is pure chaos in the best way possible. It's one of those games where the story is just an excuse to blow things up in the most ridiculous ways imaginable. The plot barely matters, this game is all about sheer freedom and destruction. The map is massive, even by today's standards, and it's packed with military bases, towns, and outposts just begging to be blown to bits. The grappling hook and parachute combo is what makes it truly special. You can grapple onto a helicopter, hijack it midair, and then crash it into a fuel depot just because you felt like it. Or tether an enemy to a gas canister, shoot it, and watch them get rocketed into the sky. It's that kind of game. And the explosions are chef's kiss. They're some of the most satisfying in any game. It's the ultimate sandbox for anyone who just wants to go wild and create absolute mayhem. Honestly, Just Cause 2 is basically a mix of creativity and destruction. You're simply an all-powerful badass left wild into the open world with complete freedom. So now it's your choice what you want to do with your full-blown powers. How you want to cause chaos in the world depends on you. It's literally an open-world game with a lot of explosions and chaos. Your only job is to have fun, explore the world, and create as many explosions as possible by destroying military bases, blasting cars, destroying outposts, and other random stuff. There are also further parts of the series if you want to go fully just because. Mad Max. Imagine the world gets destroyed, humanity is on the brink of survival, and now you're this cool badass dude who's out exploring this post-apocalyptic world. You could also say that Mad Max is basically an open-world road trip game with fuel wars and satisfying hand-to-hand combat. The open world had everything in it. Sandblasted wasteland feel that makes every moment feel like survival, scavengers and deadly factions that will wreck you if you're not prepared. There's definitely so much cool stuff that you generally won't expect from normal post-apocalyptic zombie games. Sure as hell you're going to absolutely love Mad Max. Honestly, the real star of the game is the car combat. Your magnum opus isn't just a vehicle, it's your lifeline, your war machine, and your best chance at survival. Upgrading it, customizing it, and taking it into high-speed battles feels so satisfying. You'll ram, harpoon, and explode enemy vehicles into scrap, and when you step out for some hand-to-hand combat, it's all about brawling, brutal punches, and finishing moves that hit hard. Think Arkham-style fighting, but way more raw and savage. The entire game is more about the journey and the atmosphere than deep emotional storytelling. Still, the game absolutely nails the Mad Max aesthetic, from the lawless wasteland to the insane enemy designs. It's not packed with constant action, but that just makes those sudden ambushes or storm chases even more intense.
Right, and now you'll be looking to snatch it back? That's what the prophecy says? You're the driver.
That's right.
Kena, Bridge of Spirits. Imagine stepping into a world that looks like a Pixar movie but plays like an old-school action-adventure game with some modern polish. That's Kena for you. It's got that classic Legend of Zelda feel, where you explore a semi-open world, solve puzzles, and fight enemies in these beautifully designed areas. But what really makes it stand out are the rods. Those tiny little spirit companions are not just adorable, they're actually useful in combat and puzzles. Think of them as magical helpers. They'll move objects, attack enemies, and even boost your abilities. Speaking of abilities, the combat starts off feeling simple, but don't let the cute visuals fool you. It can get surprisingly tough, especially with some boss fights. You'll be dodging, parrying, and using Kena's spirit bow, which feels incredibly satisfying to land shots with. The enemies, particularly the corrupted spirits, hit hard, and the game isn't easy. It provides you with a lot of challenges to overcome. If we talk about the storyline, then it's about guiding lost souls to the afterlife, which brings some emotional moments, but it never feels heavy-handed. The animation quality is insane, with cutscenes that look straight out of a DreamWorks movie. This game may not reinvent the wheel, but it polishes it so well that you just enjoy the ride. It's definitely a must-play if you're in the mood for some semi-open world fun with gorgeous looks or areas.
On my way, I met 2 children. They asked me to help free a boy named Taro.
They are clever children, and would do anything for their brother.
The Medium. Medium is one of those games that sticks with you, not because of insane combat or fast-paced action, but because of its atmosphere and unsettling story. If you've played psychological horror games like Silent Hill or Alan Wake, you'll vibe with this one. The game's concept is what makes it stand out. You play as a spirit medium who can exist in both the real world and the spirit world at the same time. That's the game's main hook, this split-screen mechanic where you're navigating 2 realities at once. It's not just a gimmick either, it's woven into the puzzles and story in a way that makes you feel like you're constantly walking the line between life and death. There aren't any traditional combat mechanics, so the game relies on tension, stealth, and story to keep you engaged. Overall, Medium isn't for everyone. If you're looking for action, you won't find it here. However, if you really like the concept of the game, the split-screen feature, then you must try it out. Plus, there are also those crazy, scary atmospheres. The entire game is packed with tension and suspense. It's not traditional horror with zombies and ghosts, but rather a mix of games like Silent Hill and Alan Wake.
Please, sister, set me free. No! Stay back! Stay back!
Evil Within 2. This game takes everything from the first game and cranks it up, giving you a more open world, better mechanics, and an even darker, more personal story. Let me provide you guys with a brief storyline. You play as the OG protagonist, Sebastian. This time, he finds out that his supposedly dead daughter is actually alive but is trapped in a twisted nightmare. So as always, he's trying to get her back, but the problem is that this nightmare is filled with crazy monsters, unsettling atmosphere, and some of the most disturbing imagery you'll see in a horror game. Stealth also exists, which means you can conserve your ammo and pick the enemies one by one. The choice is yours, and that adds a nice layer of tension. The game isn't just about jump scares. It plays with your mind, making you question what's real and what's not. It balances its action and horror elements so well, giving you enough firepower to fight back, but never enough to make you feel completely safe. It's a game that constantly keeps you on your toes. Before I reveal my final pick, here are some honorable mentions. The Europa, Prince of Persia Lost Crown, The Wolf Among Us,
Crooked Man's the one you want. But of course, you're too much of an idiot to see that.
the Okami. Okami is straight up one of the most beautiful and unique games I've ever played. The game showcases a beautiful watercolor painting of Japanese culture. You experience Japan in a unique way. In fact, you even play as a literal sun goddess in the form of a wolf, and your main purpose is to restore beauty and life to this cursed land. But what really makes Okami special is the celestial brush system, where you can actually draw on the screen to attack, manipulate the environment, or solve puzzles. It's such a clever mechanic that never gets old. Speaking of mechanics, the combat is smooth, kinda Zelda-like, with different weapons and techniques, but honestly, it's the world and its characters that steal the show. The game feels like a love letter to Japanese mythology, filled with quirky gods, spirits, and legendary creatures, all wrapped in a story that's way deeper than you'd expect. Okami is just pure artistic magic. It's quite an underrated game, and not many people know about it. Also, as per today's standard, the game is quite old, but it still packs a punch, and its unique setting or features make it a must-play title. I'm sure you will have a beautiful time exploring this Japanese painting. You're missing out on a masterpiece.